This is Jason. I'm back, and this is another quick video on inspecting a used go-kart. And I'm just going to do a bunch of these videos. So this one is not going to be the only video. It's just meant to be a short, quick video. Yesterday I did a similar video, same chassis, but I did the bottom side. So check that out here on YouTube. I'll put a link in the description. And if you like what we're doing, like, subscribe, share our channel, and we even accept donations to keep the content rolling. So that's the sales pitch for the moment. But again, inspecting a used chassis, and there's actually a lot that goes into it. So my little 5-minute videos isn't everything, but it should give the new carter something to think about or to ask questions about. So let's get to it. So again, yesterday I did the video on the bottom side. I pointed out the frame rails and what to look for. Again, go check it out. Today we're on the top side, and I'm going to focus on kind of the big things. So for me personally, I buy and sell a lot of carts. My other website is extracartparts.com. That's where I offer carts and services. So one of the very first things I look for is, do the brakes work? So if it's a current cart that was raced, usually you're never going to have this problem. But on older carts, like this one's been sitting in a garage for a while, check the brakes. So you want to make sure when you pull the brake, the pedal is nice and firm. It's not squishy. And you want to make sure that the pedal right here doesn't hit the bar or any cross members, because you might think, oh, I have brake, but it's actually just hitting something and you still have no brake. So with one hand, you squeeze the brake pedal. And I do two different applications. I slightly squeeze it to see where the brakes are actually touching the rotor. That would be the rotor right there. So I lightly squeeze it, and then this is going to be a little goofy. But then I take my other hand and I spin the rear tire. So I had to let go of the handle because I'm holding the camera. So you spin the tire and then squeeze into it. So that amount of brake pressure is not enough to stop the go-kart. So what you really need to do is you need to squeeze the pedal with one hand and rotate the rear tire back here with the other hand and see how much effort it takes to stop. On any of our racing carts, there should be enough braking force where you cannot turn this tire by hand. So again, that's, for me personally, that's the number one I look for, especially like when we're dealing with older carts. The brakes are going to go bad. It doesn't mean that the previous owner abused the cart. It just, carts need to be driven. They like to be driven. Carts like to be on the cart track. When they sit, the brakes just go bad. It just happens. The other thing that goes bad when carts just sit, the gas tanks. So that's the other thing I look for. Now, gas tanks are relatively inexpensive. You can get them anywhere from $50 to $100. If yours is cracked. But I do have a video on YouTube somewhere in the playlist on how to tell what gas tank you have. It's very common for these to break. So if you're looking at a used cart, look at the gas tank, because again, it's common that they crack and they break. But if you need a new gas tank, you could just take measurements. You can either send me an email if you're going to buy from me, or if you're not buying from me, contact your local cart shop. Give them the measurements. But measurements always help, because there's a number of different gas tank brands out there that will fit. But again, gas tanks crack and break. Easy replacement on most carts. Brakes, again, back to the brakes. I can't say it enough. That's the first thing I check. One, because it's fast and easy. And two, depending on the brand of the chassis, if it's a 15 or 20-year-old European cart, a lot of the brake parts are readily available, but not from the manufacturer. So you'll have to source them out through other means. So again, and I personally hate doing brakes. When you're dealing with brakes, I have a couple other videos here on YouTube of rebuilding the brakes. Sometimes it's just a simple matter that the seal is bad, or the caliper seals are bad. Sometimes it's just simple, right? But if the cart's been sitting, air's been introduced to the system, then everything starts to oxidize and corrode. Now the bores and the pistons might be all messed up. So now, can you clean them properly? You don't know. You won't know until you start doing it. If they're corroded too bad, you need to replace the master cylinder or the caliper. So I'm always making sure the brakes work because I hate rebuilding brakes. It's a nasty job. It's a dirty job. Many times on used carts, you're doing it twice because you think just replacing the seals is fine. Then you go back and they don't hold. And again, it's a used cart. That's what you get. So those are some of the other things. This cart is missing the rear bumper. I do have the rear bumper. It slides over these pegs, so it's a current rear plastic bumper. It has it. I just left it off for the video. Other things to look for. Seat struts. So as you can see, I'm going to try to get a good angle on this. You can see that seat strut is bent outward. It should not be bent outward. It should be bent inward. Just imagine, go-karts are all about energy transfer. So, get back in focus. It's bent outward a little bit. So this seat strut is going to be prone to breaking. Not a big deal if you can fabricate. I personally am not a fabricator. Pretty much any reputable kart shop has the ability to repair these for you. What probably should have been done is they probably should have been cut off, moved out, and in that way the angle is inward towards the seat. But I know what they ended up doing. They put a big boy seat in this thing. They just bent it out, probably with an axle. A used bent axle is usually what we all keep around to bend the seat struts. But you can see that there's a little bit of welding, and that's because it was probably bent outward. Then the strut snapped after that. Not a big deal. If you're a fabricator, you're thinking, oh, that's an easy fix. If you're not a fabricator or have a welder, call around before you buy a particular cart like this, because if it's broken, it needs to be repaired. Other things to look for. Make sure the rear axle is nice and free. Make sure it's not bent. You don't want any run out. When I say run out, let's see if I can kind of imitate it, because this is a straight axle. Run out would be as if it's going like this. There you go. Where just as you spin it, it goes up and down. A little bit of run out, a couple thou is probably okay. Anything over 20, 30, 40 thou is probably going to cause a nice vibration. And so the axle would have to be replaced. But you're checking the bearings. Yesterday I mentioned brake rotors. I had the cart upside down so it's harder to see. And as I'm doing this inspection here, this brake rotor is on backwards. I'll mention that in a second. But look for cracks. You're not going to see it on this rotor. But I'm going to hit this angle right here. Right here on a cart that's well used, especially on single brake carts, what will happen is the rotor will start to groove and indent, and then you'll feel a lip on the very outside of the rotor and the very inside of the rotor. It probably should be replaced. That means that rotor is end of its life cycle. And I mentioned about 30 seconds ago, this rotor is on backwards. Again, I don't know if the video is going to show it, but I'm trying to find the angle for you. Basically, the vanes on the brake rotor, they're leaning forward. So on this particular cart, the vanes on the rotor are leaning forward. On almost every single cart out there that has vented brake rotors, you want the vanes facing away from the rotation. So if it's rotating this way, from our view, it's rotating counterclockwise. You want the vanes facing clockwise. And the reason for that is you want the rotor and the hot air to get thrown away from the rotor. By putting it on backwards like this, it does not act as a scoop to cool it down. In fact, it acts as a scoop to keep the hot air from being able to expel away from the brake rotor. Now, I said there's an exception to that. There's probably other carts, but the one that comes to mind is the Sodi cart. The Sodi cart actually has arrows on their brake rotors because those are designed with the vanes leaning forward or with the rotation, but there's an arrow on it. But as far as I know, every other brake rotor, generally, you want the vanes back opposite of the rotation, so the hot air can be thrown outward and away from the brake rotor. And if you're wondering how I know that, years ago when I worked at KLS Racing, one of our customers manufactured brake rotors, and he told me about that. I believe his name was Mike Frank. I believe that was his name. And he had explained that to me. He did the rotors for, he may have done them for the Invader. I think he made them for Track Magic. But he explained to me how they work and why we do it that way. So, again, just a quick tidbit. I like to ramble sometimes. Other things to look at when you're inspecting. Yesterday, I did the bottom side for all the grinding. But on the top side, you're looking for any sort of cracks or fatigue marks, cassette hangers. Again, if you're just a recreational driver, there's no way I can't sound rude about it. It probably isn't going to matter if you haven't repaired. If you're a top level driver, you're probably not looking at many used carts anyhow. So, can I conclusively tell you how much faster or slower a worn out cart is versus a new cart? I cannot. It all depends on the driver and where you're racing. I've shown up to the track with brand new TB carts and got my ass handed to me by guys with 15-year-old CRGs. So and that was driver and chassis setup. So it had nothing to do with how old the cart was. So, but again, that's something you want to look for when you're looking at the carts. This one here, it's a little bit greasy. You can see the grease here, and that just happens with a go-kart, especially around the chain area. It tosses off. But look for these areas here. High stress areas. Are there cracks or tears in the tubing? If you cannot have cheap access to a good fabricator or welder, then you'll want to stay away from the carts that have cracks there. So we talked about the brakes. We talked about the axle. We talked about good bearings. Let's see. Oh, talking about bearings. Let's go to the steering. Other things that are important. Again, inspecting a used cart. And if you're not comfortable doing any of this yourself, I am for hire if you're in the California area. You can either bring the cart to my shop, or I can meet you somewhere. I can go with you if you're looking at carts. Again, I do charge for the service, but it is available. And so back to the front end. So things that we're looking for. We talked about bearings on the rear. So what you want to do is, I'm holding the tire. Let me change my angle here. I got my work table in the background. So you hold the tire. You lift up and down on each tire on the front end. There might be a little bit of play. When I say a little bit of play, we're talking a thou, 2 thou, something very immeasurable for most of us. There might be a little bit of slop, but let's say this thing was just all over the place. Do further inspections. It's not uncommon for a wheel bearing to start going bad on a used cart. It's not uncommon for these spindle bearings in here to go bad. So anything like that. Most of these bearings, this happens to be an American cart. It's American bearing sizes. It's all relatively cheap to replace. If you're doing the labor yourself, if you have to bring it to someone like myself or another reputable shop, the cost is going to go up because you're paying the hourly rate. But it's not like all is lost because the bearing is blown out. It's fairly simple to get the bearings out of the spindles, out of the wheel hubs. Probably the most tricky bearing as far as sourcing would be they call it a uniball. It's a uniball bearing that goes into the frame, or in this case, into the block. So to check for that, you're going to lift up and down on the steering shaft. And you'll see here, there's a little bit of play, which you need. You want a little bit of play, not a lot. But then they also have collar clamps. So the collar clamp is going to keep the steering shaft and the chassis from flexing too much and just beating the crap out of that bearing. Because these bearings here, the uniball, they're not designed for that kind of load. They're designed for left, right, smooth loads. But go-karts are very violent. When you're starting to drive them, there's a lot of flex. Again, everything about go-karting on the frame side, it's all about transfer of energy. So spindle bearings, you want to check those, check the wheels, lift it up and down. Heim joints. Oops, you don't want to see me. Give me a second here. Sorry about that. I went to go switch hands to do the Heim joint. So Heim joints, and you'll notice that that's probably going to stay on the video because I just don't do editing. If you're an intern and you want to do editing, I'm always looking for a video editor. So the Heim joints, you don't want any play up and down or left and right. Rotation is fine. You want it to rotate, that's fine. But nothing, no other slop in the Heim joints. Same here. No other slop in the Heim joints. We already talked about the brakes. And if you'll notice here, this one's missing the safety clip. So, if I fired this up on the cart stand, see how the safety clip is missing? If I fire it up on the cart stand, it'll rattle out before it even hits the track. So, yeah, just a quick note there. This one has not been safety inspected yet, as you can tell. But, bearings, Heim joints. Rotation like this is good. This way and up and down, bad. Hardware, make sure the hardware is snug or tight, depending on the specs for each bolt. All that information you can find on Google on torque settings, etc. A telltale sign on carts. Many of them have eccentric, caster, and camber pills. You want to see if the caster and camber pills are relatively in the same direction. I had a couple of carts last year that I was working on, and local, I call them my Thursday crew Karters. They basically just go out in the middle of the week and they just go pound laps. Well, they bring out new people, they put them in the cart, they hit the wall, etc. And unfortunately, I had to tell them, I go, you're in a tough spot. I can't replace your chassis for the amount of money that you paid for it. They're just, it was a very cheap chassis that he got a great deal on. But I'm out of adjustment on the front end. And what I mean by that is the caster pills are fully maxed out. The spindles are completely offset to each other to try to keep everything straight. But he needs to take it to his shop, put it on a chassis table, and get everything straightened out. The problem is on carts that are getting that old, you just start throwing money and money and money at labor. And sometimes it's cheaper to keep them on the track by repairing it. Sometimes it's better just to cut bait and move on. But so that's a telltale. So like this one here, you can tell the dot is generally pointing forward. This is the left side. The right side, change my angle, is also generally pointing forward. So I did align this cart earlier. So this is where the pills had to be in order to get the camber, caster, and the toe-in settings that I was looking for on this particular cart. So they're a little bit off from left to right, which is somewhat normal, but they're not completely opposite of each other. Spindle heights were the same. And I had found that the steering, this will be a whole different video, but the Ackerman, to exaggerate it, was basically, it wasn't centered. So I had to re-square the cart up to make sure that we had equal turning left to right, and the steering wheel wasn't cocked. So in order to get a good toe-out number originally, the steering shaft was cocked. And that wasn't correct. So I re-squared the cart up. There's a number of different ways to do that. That'd probably be a video down the road. But back to the inspection part. Bodywork, depending on what you're doing, depending on what you're buying, before you ever buy any used go-kart, go to the kart track. I would recommend the closest kart track to you to start with. You need to decide, do you want to race competitively? I don't care what level it is, club racing, regional, or national. Or do you just want to go out and recreate and just have a good time with karting? If you want to race at a club to national level, each series and track operator is going to dictate what equipment you may have on the track to race competitively. If you want to recreate, the world is open to you, as long as the cart maintains some of the same racing standards as far as safety, mainly bodywork, to be on the track. So ask yourself, do I want to race or do I want to recreate? If you want to race, the window shrinks down quite a bit when it comes to your options. If you want to recreate, the karting world is your oyster. Was that the right saying? I don't know. But let's see here. So that's just some other things. And the reason I bring it up is because this is outdated bodywork here. It's older style bodywork. But any track in Northern California would allow this kart on the track. I don't have in the video the rear bumper. I mentioned that already. But this kart is supplied with a rear plastic bumper. And the rear plastic bumper comes out to the edge of the tires. So pretty much every track in Northern California requires that. So before you spend a single penny on a go-kart, go to your local track. If you think you want to race or get into karting, before you spend a single penny on a go-kart, contact Norcal Karters. We will put you in touch with a reputable business that offers karting schools. Go to a karting school first. They're going to answer a lot of your questions, and after that karting school, you are going to know if you want to race karts as a recreation, you want to go compete, or, oh, that was fun, but this really just isn't what I want to spend the money on. So I hope this video was helpful. I'm going to cut it a little bit short. There's probably a lot of stuff I'm missing on, but as I get more karts through the shop, I'll just keep doing these inspection type videos. One day we'll do them on the engine and what to look for. But yeah. Oh, I guess we do tires too. So if you're looking at used tires or used karts, you want to look at the tires. Again, if you're going to race, each track will tell you what tire they run for each class. If you're going to recreate, it doesn't matter. I sell used tires all day long for $100 a set for used tires. But I sell them to recreational guys because not every single track uses the tire that I sell. But if you're looking at tires, one of the telltales, you want to look for uneven wear from left to right. For the most part, if the outside dot or the inside dot has a lot of depth to it, and then the outside one is completely shot, it may be an indication that something is a little bit off on the chassis. It could be something as simple as alignment. Now, there are some tracks, like in Northern California, Kinsman Kart Club, the front left-hand tire. You're going to shred that front left-hand tire. The inside dots. That's just how the track is. Turn one is very fast. So you're going to have dots. You want to make sure that the rims, there's no damages, there's no cracks if they're magnesium or cast aluminum. You don't want any pry marks. You don't want any dry cracking for the most part. And I don't know if I have any right in front of me here. I don't. The other thing you don't want are cords showing. You'll see the cords will run in this angle. You don't want cords showing through the tires. Now, you're buying a used kart. That's going to be part of it. But if there's cords showing, and I've done this, I've driven the tires till they popped. I wouldn't recommend it for a new karter because you just don't know how the kart's going to react. When I did it, the air just slowly let out. I had a flat tire. I pulled off the track. But for new karters, you kind of want to minimize anything like that. You just want to spend as much time on the track as you can without having mechanical failures. So if you liked the video, if you didn't like the video, either way, leave a comment, like and subscribe to our channel. And again, we will just keep pumping out how-to videos. And again, these are really tailored towards the beginner.